to thank the Ohio Chamber for allowing us to meet here. This meeting place seems to be convenient for most, and they have other meetings here too as well, not only with the chamber, but other business meetings. And if you or any of your organizations or your county's organizations are interested in the chamber, I have cards that I can put out here, and you can take them and give them a call. They're great advocates for business.
Larry, can you get a better microphone set up like the one for the roll call?
Let me see if we can get one. We have them in the ceiling, but apparently they're not loud enough. Let me see if I can get a microphone. All right. With that said, I'll just speak up, Dr. Rosen, until we get one. Can you hear me okay? I don't mean to yell. I apologize to everybody, but so we changed the meeting around a little bit. Short of doing the meeting minutes, we're going to spend most of our time on the allocation, continue our discussion from last month about how we disperse the funds between the state, the regions, operations, and investments. But with that said, now the mic's back in. We'll go ahead and get an approval for those February meeting minutes. Right. Any questions or discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
We just had one simple
Yes,
correction.
I'm sorry, Greta.
Greta Mayer, M-A-Y-E-R, not Mason. I think Donna Mason and I were confused. Our names were mixed together. I was absent.
Or we got married.
Well, we did. It's been pretty fast.
We will make that change. Thank you, Greta. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay. Are we good on microphone?
Not quite, they're double checking something.
So we'll just go ahead and begin and continue our discussion and allocation and distribution. I'll open it up to the floor. Senator Collins.
Thanks, Larry. I know, Jeff, this week and talk about some of the ideas he's had, but I wanted to just, I guess, get us kicked off with, I guess, some of the ideas that I would have regarding this. I know there is an awful lot of, there's probably at least several of you who would like to see all of this money go 100% to the local regions and be distributed right away. And I can certainly understand why that would be the mindset or the push from people. I personally would respectfully oppose that, and primarily for a variety of reasons. Number one, I think, and we've talked about this a little bit more in previous meetings about what the long-term vision is of this organization, whether we're going to make it something that's evergreen, whether we're going to take some of the money and endow it, put it in somewhere where we can potentially grow a nest egg or grow a part of the fund that can, I guess, outlive maybe all of our time on the board to be something that will go forward. If we're going to do that, we're going to have to do it sooner rather than later, because there's an obvious benefit to putting money in investments to be able to grow with time. And so I would urge us to take a serious look at that. Another thing I would say is, even though it may not seem apparent right now, I would urge us to keep some of the money back, not just for operations, of course. And I don't think there's anybody saying we shouldn't keep money back for operations, but also keeping money back for the inevitable state projects that are going to come up that maybe don't fit neatly into the box of one region or another. And so we may not know what those are right now, but we'll know them when we see them. And I would say that when we do see them, we're going to wish that we had some of this money here for us to be able to fund something like this on a statewide basis. And it may even be something that's an offshoot of a region project that comes up and we see good results out of, that we say, let's see if we can spread this across the entire state. I would also say this. All of us as board members, have a fiduciary duty to this organization. Now, I'm not suggesting that we would be breaching our fiduciary duties by sending all of this money down to the regions. I am saying that whatever does come up from the region, I think does need to be subject to board approval. Whatever it is that we're going to be doing, because we are the ones ultimately who have that oversight responsibility on behalf of the board. I would also say that we as fiduciaries for this organization should also be maintaining some of this money within.
We might have to
state
use a
projects,
different computer. Is
given the
that
fact
okay?
that
You
is
guys
part of
login
our
through a different
governance.
Zoom?
And so that would be my general mindset.
It's
after
not
the
popping up and I'm
discussion.
not sure why, to be honest.
Is it on that?
So I-
No, it's gonna be in the, it's
When-
gonna be one
for
in the
the
closet.
first
I'm on the phone with
line,
the
you
TR, so we
identify
can get it
yourself
set up
and
for you
speak.
guys.
Yeah, Fix, we've maintained, the good conversation, Holly earlier in the week and appreciate his perspectives and things and, respectfully disagree. The idea of, making this, an evergreen, organization to me is counterintuitive to, attacking with everything we have right now, this, pandemic, or whatever you wanna call it. People are dying every day, and I think the idea of putting money aside so that 20 years from now we can, continue the program. I'd rather see us figure out a way to get this thing beat in the next 5 to 10 years, right? So any dollar that we put aside for year 22 or 25 or 30 is a dollar that we're not using today to try to save somebody. I think there certainly will be state projects that will be valuable. I don't know what those are, as Senator Powell said. I don't know that any of us do. There are some ideas already being floated around. I am certain that there will be some that float to the surface that will be worth our time and investment, and very much look forward to that, because I think at some point down the road, having a major statewide program will be a significant part of the solution to our problem. We did talk about the fiduciary responsibilities. It's my understanding, and I think we talked about this, that our role as a board is to when applications come up from the regions to say, yes, this meets the criteria that's been established and agreed to by the board, or no, it doesn't. If it's no, it doesn't, it goes back to the region and they can deal with it. Yes, it does, then it's funded and the money goes out. So the thought process that I've had several conversations with members about is the idea that in year one, and only year one, 100% of the money that's available after our board expenses goes to the region. In year two, we would say 5% goes to the state. In year three, 10% goes to the state. And that would do a couple things. Number one, it sends a very clear message to the regions that we understand that they've been, boots on the ground, right? They've been struggling, and we want to be supportive of their efforts to fight this. And number two, it allows us some time to evaluate those programs that may come up that would be statewide, would be a statewide program. You referenced the idea of something that comes from a region that may be so good in a region that it would be used statewide. That would be good in years 2, 3, 4, whatever. And also suggest that really anything we do past year one, maybe year two, we're really just making projections, right? It's like trying to project the state budget 3 or 4 years from now. We don't really know what the situation's going to be. We'll be able to see what happens in the regions in year one and start the evaluation process of that. Start putting money aside for the state. And then through year two, really see the effect of the year one programs in the regions and start to see the effects of the year two, and have heard some proposals on statewide programs. So I'm advocating for a 0, 5, and 10 to the state over the first 3 years. That's that's just one guy's opinion, but, I do respect, Senator points and appreciate his perspective.
Judge,
David Mattia, Region 3.
Excuse me, could you tell us who spoke? Who just made those remarks? I can't see and I couldn't tell who that was. I'm sorry to interrupt the next speaker here, but who was the last speaker, please?
Jeff Davis, Region 18.
Thank you. That's what I thought. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, from David Mattia, Region.
Okay, so how do we turn, do we have to unplug the,
Meeting is up.
So.
it is, but they can't see anybody else.
Okay. So,
So,
hey, how's it going?
Can you hear me? Portland?
I just can't hear over the whispering. I think somebody's trying to make some technical improvements, but I can't hear the conversation in the room because of the whispering about getting the mics better. So thanks.
Okay. And so paragraph 11 of the MOU states the foundation board shall develop and approve procedures for the disbursement of the funds, consistent with this memorandum of understanding. And then the significant part here is 11B. Funds for statewide programs, innovation, research, and education may also be expended by the foundation. Any statewide programs funded from the foundation board would be only as directed by affirmative vote of the board. So just so we're clear, you know, if we were led to believe that we have to fund statewide programs, it's a may and not a shall language. I'm not against funding statewide programs. I think that would be a good idea. Really, it sets the groundwork for future work, but I just want everybody to have a clear understanding of what is in the document that guides this board's work. Thank you.
thanks, John.
Tom Gregloff, governor appointment.
Jane, can you hear this? Can you hear Tom? Okay, good.
Try to be worth listening to. You know, the state and the regional, it's a really important conversation, and I don't want to comment on that at the minute, at the moment. I do want to comment on your, Senator, your statement about the long term. This is maybe the worst addiction crisis we've been in our lifetimes, but it's not the only one, and it's not the last one. And we've always been in addiction crises of one type or another, and there'll be another one coming. And so I hope that we think longer term in that respect about what's over the horizon. You can talk to people, and this one was seeable. You know, the methamphetamine was seeable if we you know, had the surveillance. So we do need to lean into this one, lean into hard. You know, people will die while we're sitting here, and there'll be some other way they're dying in 20 years if we aren't prepared to address that.
I saw Dr. Roizen's hand a while ago online. I didn't know if you had a comment.
Dr. Rollington?
Yeah, I have 2 points to make relating to the state distribution. One is that we want these programs to be sustainable in the regions. And the money we get the first year will be greater than we get in years 2, 3, 4, et cetera, because of the double allocation. So I would propose that the money we put aside for the state program in year 1 be that in excess of what we expect in years 2, 3, 4 from a sustainability standpoint, so we can sustain the regional programs. The second point I want to make is the importance of both prevention and prevention of recidivism in the statewide program. No region has the demographics that are great enough in diversity to do a prevention of recidivism. So say that, for example, Ozempic, which in the blogosphere not only prevents the craving of food, prevents the craving of drugs and recidivism. Say we want to do a randomized trial on a statewide program of that versus buprenorphine. That would require statewide funding because it would be in multiple regions to get enough diversity to show effectiveness in a long trial. And I think that's an important enough aspect that combined with the fact that we want the regions to be sustainable, I would support putting a sizable, meaning whatever is in excess of what is, whether it's 5 or 10% that is, or 15%, that is in excess of what is sustainable in that first year, and then go with the 5 and 10 recommendation that was proposed.
Thank you, Dr. Wisdom.
Thank you. And thank you. I appreciate the perspective of everybody that has already spoken. This is Denise Streethouse. Sorry, James. Denise Streethouse, Region 2. Sorry. So I want to just lend a perspective from Region 2. I was in the governor's office or the governor's mansion when we started this process with many of us who were suing throughout the state of Ohio. Hamilton County was part of that suit. City of Cincinnati was part of that suit. Many of us were there. And we had a discussion about how we were going to disperse the pot to begin with. And that's where we ended up with these different percentages, the 15 going to the governor and the AG, the 55 to the foundation, the rest of it to direct down to local governments, and that's all local government. And so we had that conversation about what fair disbursement would be of dollars, with some recognition that when the rubber meets the road, it's the locals doing the work. We're the ones that are seeing the overdoses. We're the ones funding the Narcan. We're the ones involved in treatment and prevention. And so there was an understanding that this foundation would get the majority of the money because we're the ones doing the work. So this conversation now about a further disbursement or a divvying out of the money is not fully aligned from my vantage point from where we started. And so in Region 2, we have set up our foundation, our local foundation. We've been meeting for many, many months. We've got a list of priority projects that we would like to fund. We're a population of 830,000. We can use every dime that we get, frankly, but we've got experts at the table, the sheriff, the coroner, we've got people with lived experience, we've got doctors, elected officials. We have been working really hard in taking this process really seriously. And so we had a meeting recently, and I mentioned that we were going to have this conversation about disbursement. And from where we sit, it's a little bit of a head scratcher that the regions aren't getting the money in full, other than the administrative costs, which I think everybody understands. And so I am open to some kind of compromise language where we would anticipate in the future from some statewide programs, especially if they were to mirror some of the good stuff that's bubbling up from the regions. But it seems to me that our first allocation should be where we said it was going to be, which is down to the regions after all of the projects that come up are evaluated and the money flows back down. And so I have to represent my region. They feel very strongly about this. It's a group of about 26 people who have spent many months trying to figure out how we spend our $2 billion and to think through a lesser amount, but no matter how many of these come in, a lesser percentage, it just is something that they cannot get their arms around. The other question I have is if we were to, at any point, have statewide, and you're right, we don't have to, but we can, the state 15%, they also can do statewide projects. They don't have to, but they can. So we can all do this. And I think it would be interesting actually to have a match, maybe from two different, maybe the foundation piece and the state piece, and say, well, why don't we, if we have statewide projects that are worthy of investment, maybe we do it together and we match each other's funds. But my question is, and I don't know if anybody has thought through this, I'm not sure where the statewide projects are coming from. Like we know clearly that the regions are going to come with projects, and we are going to vet those projects, evaluate, and then give our input. I'm not sure where the statewide projects come from. Who says, here's my idea for a statewide project? And I'm not trying to be critical, I just don't really understand.
It could come from industry. And Dr. Risen had a good example of the drug that he just mentioned. I met earlier last month with a individual who is representing a company that is producing something similar to Narcan, but this is a one hit and you're done. I guess, and I'm not that familiar with it, with Narcan, you can keep hitting them, hitting them, hitting them, before it actually takes effect because the overdose is so extreme. This is only one. Those type of projects could be completely life-saving. And really, if we're gonna eradicate this problem, we're not gonna do it through recovery or things like this. We're gonna do it for prevention, right? So we gotta start at the very beginning stages. Those are probably not a project that a region would be able to sustain because it would be too big and frankly, it could be national, if not statewide. So those are the type of statewide projects that could be examples of what we could fund in the future. Not necessarily in year one, because we don't even have it. We don't know what we don't know. And the more attention that we, the more attention we pay to this, the more innovative people that are coming out with ideas are going to bring to the table. A lot of them are probably holding close to their chest because they don't have the funding yet. They don't want to let it out there because it's a good idea for somebody else to take it. But if we can help them move this along, it could truly be transformational.
But what is the process for that idea to come in front of this committee?
Well, that's what the grant making is doing.
So we're trying to, I'm on the grant committee. So yeah, I just, again, we'll have to sort that out, but as defined, it's through the MOU and through conversations that we've had, we've got a clear process for the regional piece. Just if we're going to go down this road, I would like to know what the process is so that folks are very clear on that point.
And as you're on the grant making, it's still being developed, but I think that's where it lies. I really do like the idea of matching funds, Denise. I think that's an incredible idea because it makes the money go a lot further than it's just our money. And maybe we do work with the AG's office or other, maybe some of the departments in the governor's office or legislation to do matching funds to help take these monies farther on statewide and, you know, probably large regional projects as well.
Okay, Julie Hayman, Region 15, and while I'm not opposed to statewide projects, I must reiterate what Commissioner Greenhouse has said, that when we were at these initial meetings developing the MOU, there was clear delineation that the state was gonna get 15% and there was a regional portion allocated through the foundation. So as people gave up their right to litigate, they clearly thought this money was gonna come back to them. And so we need to demonstrate that we're going to satisfy that promise. Again, Denise says, how are the statewide projects coming? I haven't seen that clearly defined. Making that we've been discussing. So is that a process that's ready to go? You know, we've set a very clear timeline that we want projects to come to us in June, be deliberated and decided this summer. I don't know if the statewide process has been defined to make that happen. But if we have got a process and we have said how the region is supposed to do it. So I would like this, you know, along with some of these others, advocate that I think we really need to focus on the regions.
So the focus can be the regions. No one's saying that it shouldn't. But in the policy, that statewide piece has to be in there. If this board is going to do it this year, do it next year, however this board is going to set that process up, it has to be written into the policy. So you're not.
Who's speaking, please? Who's speaking,
Hi,
please?
it's Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine.
So it's not going to be able to be, the policy has to include that. We can't just not include that, start the regional process and then come back. So it is going to need to be in there, and it's been my understanding all along that that group has been working on a process in those meetings.
Working, let me say, we're working on policy to begin with. It's not the role of the grant committee to render a decision about state versus region. That's the whole committee will make that decision out of this conversation. But yeah, we've been articulating how the regionals flow in, who approves, and also the state. And when we get to the point which we approve the policy, then we'll lead a little more into procedures and all of that, but I'll give a report later and tell you we've got a lot of time.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes, Greta.
Thank you. I just want to, expand on what Tom was saying earlier about, the epidemic and how there will be something new and different. And what the senator was saying about planning for the future, I think it's really wise when we talk about investments and making sure we're going to be here to address these big, problems. And we want big transformational projects at the local level. So I represent Region 14. And they're very clear to me that they would like the largest share in all of it to go to the region. But also sitting here on this board as a director, I'm mindful of our role of the statewide foundation as a whole. And I want it to be evergreen or everlasting and for the future. And I would love to see something transformational in a randomized controlled trial, as Dr. Roizen was mentioning, about how we could really affect the epidemic and help people in a big, big way. I really like the idea that you were saying about a matching with the state portion. That seems to me like a really great idea. But one thing I want to think about is just reflect on how fragile our workforce is and how fragile some of the nonprofits are right now fighting this epidemic. And that I think we should consider whatever percentage we're talking about and doing what portion is regional, what portion is state. And I like the titrated kind of planning on that, but thinking about the large projects that we want to fund in the regions will need to be multi-year, and many of them will probably ask for multi-year investments. I think that's a good idea. Let's think about continuation. I would say 3 years. I think those folks who are hiring up, those folks that are needing in agencies and partnerships that have been in existence fighting the fight, really need to be able to rely on some consistency. And I'm not saying I don't believe in sustainability, and that needs to happen at the local level as well. But I think we have to be thinking about whatever our split is, that we look at least for 3 years for larger projects, and maybe some will be a one year ask. But for us to be thinking about, these could be multi-year projects, and we want that to have that transformational change.
Yes.
Good morning, Jeanette Morsticki, representing Region 11. And I want to echo some of the other comments that have already been made about how important these funds are to the region, especially in the first year or two. And I appreciate the discussion with some of the statewide projects that have been mentioned. I think that the trial program that Dr. Rosen mentioned is very intriguing to me. But again, our local communities are really struggling to address the pandemic that's occurring with substance abuse. And I truly believe that the first year or two needs to maximize the amount of funding.
So just Jeff Fix again, just as a point of clarification, we had some discussion about long-term and the next drug epidemic, whatever that may be. And I want to understand, I'm not memorizing the MOU yet. So are we constrained to fighting the opioid epidemic, or is it any drug issue that comes down the road?
So the code of regulations was written with SUV. So it was written so that we could expand beyond the opiate epidemic itself, because we all know that opiates isn't the only drug that's being used. So we made sure that in the code of regulations, we stated SUD, which covers the opiate epidemic as well as others.
That clarification.
Don? Oh, sorry, Senator.
No, go ahead, Don.
Okay, just getting back to the source of the funds that we're dealing with. Just last Monday, the Kansas City Council passed an ordinance authorizing settlement so the city can participate in the national opiate settlements with Teva, Allergan, CVS, Walgreens, and Walmart. So even as of a week ago, municipalities are, I'll say, putting their personal interests aside so the money can be funneled through the national settlement process. Again, they're looking, in my case, Zanesville, looking to make sure they get the share that is deserved of the region through those settlements. So it goes back to what was being stated earlier, that the funding of 15% and 30%, 55% is in place so that the state can do with what they want with their money. Again, the local governments can do what they want with their money, but we have the responsibility of getting the money back to the regions with our 55%.
Senator?
For purposes of this conversation, I know we've discussed it before, but can Larry or somebody, can we go through the money, exact dollar amounts we're expecting for the next 3, 4, however many years?
We don't know the exact amount, but we can do rough numbers. I think the first round will be the first and second year, which will be in the 50 million range. And Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong, the next one is gonna be in the 30.
Is that 50 million year one, 50 million year two, and then
No,
No.
30
fine.
total?
Because-
Okay.
Yeah. We're gonna
And
get them
these-
both at the same.
These are not exact numbers.
I think it's closer to 54 million. Jim, is that
Yes, that's correct.
correct?
Yeah.
So it's, I think it's 54 million, and then I think it's 34 million, but again, give or take a lot. I don't know how much.
So the timing of those, you have an estimate as well.
We are hoping to have funds in sometime in April. It could be May, but we're hoping in April.
And how much is that?
54.
54 million.
And then the next round, Jim is, and Catherine would be in midsummer.
Yeah, midsummer.
And that'd be-
And then we were gonna distribute in late fall, according to the timeline, right? And the idea is to distribute only once a year. It's just egregious to do it too often and very difficult. We just have to have too many staff.
55 would be April, and then 34 would be midsummer.
So we're getting 1 and 2 at the same time in April or May. And then we'll get June, July, August, year 3.
So we're actually behind in our payments. This is Catherine. Payments 1 and 2 were supposed to happen in 2022. What happened was they did not get the processes set up for the national administrator, so payments 1 and 2 went out. 1 went out in August by the Attorney General, and payment 2 went out in January to the local government. So the foundation is now due payments 1 and 2, and then everybody will be on target for payment 3 mid-year.
But then would we be making payments out to the regions this fall, and it would include the 54 plus the 34 to be paid out in the fall?
That is a decision
Yeah.
that the board has to make.
We haven't determined
Okay.
that yet. But the senator brings up an excellent point that I wanted to address, that whenever we vote on this, and it may not be today because we don't need to, because we don't have the money, we have 90 days, and we're not going to distribute funds until the end of the year. But we're going to vote on percentages with how much we're going to give the regions and how much we're going to give the state, how much we're going to use. Operations will probably be a flat number, so we'll just take that right off the top. And then if we do anything for investment. But if you're looking at multi-year projects and they, 50 million is obviously a lot more than 34. When they distribute the funds, the next round of funds is going to be significantly less than the first round. So if they're planning and budgeting for that, they need to take a harder look and say, okay, wait. My project is X amount of dollars a year. They're going to have to remember the first year they're going to get a lot more money than they will the second year. If that makes sense.
So Jeff Fix here, so if I'm understanding right, we're gonna get $88 million roughly this year. And then the next time we get money would be in 2025, is that accurate, or would it be in 2024?
24.
And do we know how much that was?
I think it'd probably be 40. Okay, 40. Yes. Jeff.
Another point to consider, those of us who represent regions,
are having difficulty formulating asks, so to speak, because we're unclear as to what the amounts available will be. It's hard to put together unless you're gonna allocate it by percentage. If I wanted to do, 25% of the Region 3 allocation to sober housing, 25% to Narcan purchase, 25% to neighbor next door corner, as opposed to 500,000 for this, $1 million for that, without knowing or having any kind of range of expectation as to what might be flowing through the regions, really hard to put together an effective use of that fund. So I'm asking that, at least before we leave this meeting today, can we come up with a date where we're gonna decide on a state region allocation?
So we are, in order to get the monies, we still have a few things that have to be completed, which is why we're anticipating April or May for those items, those deposits to come in. If the board decides today what those allocation percentages are, we're close to a grant policy. We have 2 other policies that need to be written and brought forth. April could be a very productive meeting with approving policies, approving, some finalized pieces in order for Jim to be working with the Attorney General's office on those exact numbers and looking for that. But this board has to make some decisions in order for us to start having those real conversations and giving them, exactly what we need to have in place.
So to answer your question, Judge, we just don't know, probably beyond year 3, what the exact numbers are.
The monies are going to change too, according to investment. So if we're investing dollars and taking those investment dollars and pushing them back to the region, the percentage that the dollar amount that the region is going to get is going to increase because we're investing those dollars to push those monies back out. So you're never going to have a consistent number across the year. The hope is that each year it's more because of the investments, because of the monies coming in, maybe other revenue. So other settlements, Don mentioned the new settlements that are going to be coming through. This foundation will be getting 55% of that settlement. So those are more dollars coming in that will be able to go back out to the region to be invested. All of these pieces will continually, hopefully, make the money grow so that every year more money than anticipated in a settlement dollar amount is going to go back to the regions and to fund whatever initiatives statewide that this board decides on.
Now, one thing we probably could do, so there isn't a large influx of money, we could break it into year 1 and then break it into year 2 and take the year 1 pot and look at the grants, and then year 2 pot and look at the grants, and then year 3 pot, look at the grants, rather than combining year 1 and 2, because that could be confusing to some of the recipients. But that would be up to the grant making.
So I just want to make sure I understand, year 1 and year 2, 54 million, and as of, at least for now, we are planning that the regions will do application for year 1 and year 2 together. At least that's kind of the initial plan. But they will also do a different application for year 3, which is 34 million. Is that correct?
Well, as I suggested, you could do year 1 applications, you could do year 2 applications, even though we have both of the funds at the same time, you could do it 3 different times. I mean, feasibly.
But I'm just trying to get on the right schedule. I don't think we want to make the region submit 3 different applications in a 6-month period. Correct, I just have them submit, maybe a larger one for year 1 and 2 entry, maybe, I don't know. Obviously, we have to make sure the regions are aware they will have a significant reduction starting, year 4 or however you want to do it. But I agree with Judge. We need to probably decide that. So, again, region 17, Mircha, Handru, we are in the same boat. We have a list of projects, but trying to figure out how to prioritize based on how much money we have available. And I do want to echo some of the previous comments. Again, I'm representing the regions, and again, was their understanding, especially the commissioners, when they sign on this, that the money will come to the region. And again, I'm not totally opposed to a statewide project, but I'm in support that at least maybe in year 1 or 2, that 100% of the funds will go to the region.
Excluding operations.
Correct.
Okay,
And investment.
investment.
So, one of the things we're gonna have to figure out on the, grant making committee and governance, right? So a lot of the, as it's been suggested, and I think it makes sense, a lot of the requests that we get would be multi-year, 2 or 3 year requests. And we can't agree to fund it in year 1 and then not have the money set aside for years 2 and 3. So we have to figure out how we're gonna manage that process, because you know, we don't wanna turn on the tap and then turn it off after we do. So it's not a point of debate, it's kind of a point of discussion that we need to have in our community.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and Jim, we talked about that, but we need to do that in collaboration with fiscal leadership as well, too, as we think about how to budget. So, but we have clearly talked about funding multi-year projects.
And the other thing, Jeff, is to think about, in the unfortunate event that the disbursement was not successful, the region didn't live up to, which I don't foresee that happening. I mean, maybe it would be 18 years it might. There could be some, because there will be audits, that maybe years 2 and 3 aren't given out. And how do we, does that go back into the regional money? Does that go, I mean, to that region, or do we have to determine that? Sometime we'll have to look at that as well. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Region allocation, we're talking about this being a pass-through in some regards. I don't see how we would ever have a circumstance where the region is not going to get their full percentages outlined by the MOU. I mean, even if they spend it on, you know, cotton candy and, you know, dental floss, the document kind of, I don't know that we really have, is that going to be an issue?
Absolutely. I think that is an issue. We have to make sure these funds are for what they were requested to use for. So if they're buying cotton candy, whatever, then clearly they should not be participating in future.
But in reality, it's pretty
And-
broad as far as what
Well,
allocation.
Well, and they're evidence-based. Remember, we as a fiduciary have to make sure that they comply with that evidence.
Right, so there, it's not gonna be complicated, right? Yeah. If they put in an application to do X, Y, and Z, and their application meets all of our criteria as a board, and we approve that allocation. And then they go by cotton candy, then that's when we, you know, step forward, right? But, if they put an application for cotton candy, they're not.
But if they misuse the funds, then we might even fall back if it was egregious and try to get the money back. Now,
So
once the money's spent, the money's spent.
right, so we have discussed that in our committee, and the thought of the clawback is pretty hard to
Enforce.
You'd spend more money chasing it than you would.
Yeah, it just depends how large the amount is, but you're right. Any other questions, comments? Yes.
I thought I understood that if for some reason a region wasn't able to use all their allocation in the first round, that it stayed with the region, it didn't go back into a big pot, and that's what
That's correct.
okay, that's what I told them, and I'm the only woman on my committee, so I like to be right.
You can't be wrong if you're a guy, you know? Leave that alone. So if I might just clarify, in 2023, there will be roughly $88 million that comes to this board. in 2024, another 40 million. will come through. Right, okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Because we talked about different buckets here. So when you talked about the overhead, I think we all understand, got to run the organization, got it, take that off. Then you've got the distribution, this is Denise Treehouse, sorry, the distribution down to the regions. And then we've got this potential statewide. You have also mentioned an investment portion, which I don't think we've really talked much about. Is the investment that you refer to part of the statewide piece, or what are we talking about when it comes to the investment?
Well, Don is the chair of the investment committee, and we're going to propose a policy for that today. To answer your question, it could go either way. It could go regional or it could go state. But since we're only dispersing funds once a year, you know, like in this example, we have $50+ million. That could be $100,000 a month. So we're not talking about chump change. So we do need to, you know, invest and do something with the money, whether it go back to the regions or go to the statewide projects or continue to invest. And clearly, if you invested over a period of time, you could be making quite a bit of money. I did a quick calculation on, let's say, the board approved putting 10% back of the 50 million. This is just for the sake of argument. Over 3 years, we should have $500,000 investment money back to us, in addition to the principal of $5 million. So the money will grow pretty quickly because you're talking about large sums, which will allow for larger projects like this, or Dr. Rosen mentioned, or like I said, we don't know what we don't know, that this wonderful project comes in, but they really need significantly more money. The investment, or as the senator mentioned, endowment could be, you know, growing over time, because time is what helps you make the money, as you're well aware. And if you can invest it early, then you have the benefit of time to make more money.
Good. Okay.
Which would go back to
Right.
projects, whatever they might be.
Understand the nature of investments, but so that's another portion then that we're talking about coming off the top and not going down to the regions, right? I mean, that has to come from somewhere.
Right.
So if we're talking about investments, statewide, regions, overhead, we diminish what's going to the regions. And this is, again, I'm region 2. This is like my ultimate concern is protecting the money that we understood would go to the regions and now lopping off another portion, another percentage of that money. And then that's why, because I've heard this idea about investment, if the investment is to allow for us to invest in statewide projects, hopefully in conjunction with others, perhaps the state portion, then that's different than, but if I'm hearing, and I just want to be clear on this, that we're talking about a statewide portion being taken off, an investment portion being taken off, then we're back to a reduced amount for the regions. And so I just want to throw that out there because I'm not really clear on if the investment is the state piece or if it's a separate.
Well, it doesn't have to be the state. It could go back to the region. Right? We're just letting. You know, right, you're talking about the percentage, but longer term, it could go back.
I understand.
So I don't think it's really quite fair to say it's taking out of the regions, because maybe it won't. It just means the regions wouldn't get it immediately, right? Maybe they'll get it in free. Well, that's up to the board to decide, right? At the end of the day, how do we allocate their investment money?
The investment portion is a may, it's not a shall, correct?
Right,
And the state portion is a may, not a shall.
that's right. Yes, sir.
In this inflationary environment, and I'm not sure that holding any money back is a wise financial decision. We're going to be required to invest conservatively, and any return on investment, even if you got 5% in the treasury bills, is not going to exceed how the money's being eroded by inflation, which is currently at 7%. So
Sure.
holding the money back, thinking you're going to make money on it, without factoring in the time value of money, may not be the best course of action.
Perhaps. You're right, the inflation does make a difference, but like I said, the $50 million provided a return of a very low, in this, we're talking about commercial paper, right, of about 100,000 a month. So. You know, it's better than just sitting in the account. And of course, we're gonna have the money for almost a year. After year 3. They will be invested. We have to, we're only gonna distribute once a year anyway. So we do need to have an investment policy.
Well, I'm not against that. The money that we sit on temporarily, which should be invested, but holding money back for today's money to distribute in 3 to 5 years, I don't see that as being a wise financial decision.
Is that the goal, Mr. Hamburger, is that the goal that we try to decide the percentage of those 4 buckets that Denise mentioned today?
No, we
No,
don't need to decide it today. There's no reason to decide it today because we don't have the money yet. And we have 90 days after that. We still have a few policies that need to be in place before we receive the money. So we will probably decide it in April.
I just thought that deciding on the percentage, it will help the regions, give them 30 extra days to prioritize their projects.
But they'll still have, how long beyond April?
May.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry that I keep having to read on this, get fixed again. So, talking about doing allocations once a year. I've got some money coming in shortly and then some money coming in later this year. Is the idea to allocate all of that money in round 1? Or round 1 would just be the 54 million that we're receiving quickly? Yes. I'm asking.
So each allocation that comes in, resolution has to be passed. So we cannot pass resolution for those future dollars. It has to happen once that deposit is made within 90 days. So the board at that time, at the 3rd year payment, can determine if monies are going to go back out. That would require a whole nother grant cycle for this year to happen.
So $54 million in the next few months, another $34 million a few months after that, and another $40 million from what's the timing in 2024?
So they're talking about mid-year payments. Now that could change as the national administrator gets caught up with all of the payments to everyone, and a cycle could actually, we could see some regular.
So I'm just trying to figure out how we're not having money sitting in a bank somewhere for a year at a time.
You can start a second grant process with that second payment after your first round has ended. So you could technically, if we go with the aggressive timeline that we have right now, monies would be distributed the beginning of October. You could actually start a second round of grant process starting in October and probably disbursement sometime around late January, early February. So you could actually disperse your monies
So
over time.
potentially, for the first 3 allocations, we could do 3 allocations in the first 2 years. Right, so to get caught up, in essence, right, so that we're not sitting on money for a year and a half, waiting for the calendar to be put. Does that make sense to everybody that we try to do that instead of just doing the once a year? If we did 3 allocations in the first 2 years, does that make sense? I got one head nod. That's good. Thank you.
I mean, it makes sense to my region because if I understand correctly, as long as the project is approved, we could carry those money over. Right, the money stay with the region. So I don't think we are in at least that's why I understand. It's not like I get the first year and I have to spend it in 90 days just because another allocation starts. I understand that we can carry those over as long as it stays.
Yeah, the 90 days does not have anything to do with regions spending their dollars. It has to do with the allocation from this board of how many dollars are going to be allocated for the regions to have their percentages taken off from that.
So something else to think about and a way out of it. Now, let's recognize we have been called upon to, shoulder an incredibly difficult burden. creating a foundation, that requires the formation and population of an expert panel that we're actually a couple of months away from finalizing, getting an executive director, on a search. We've got the grant policies almost there, but then reviewing the grant is gonna take time. This is heavy lifting, and, understanding that all of our regions are, anticipating their disbursements, we could placate everything. We could vote at next month's meeting just to say, let's distribute the entire 55 to the regions. The rest of the funds, we won't distribute until we have our house completely in order, the expert panel, the executive director, the grant committee. It kind of solves, it simplifies, but it may not satisfy everybody. I know there's no state programs in that scenario initially, but the door's not closed on them. And it would move the ball forward and take a little pressure off of us, because we are under a lot of time pressure. You go back to, I'm sure you're experiencing, and then you go to region meetings, if they want to know, it's been a year now, when are we gonna see $1 So it's something to think about. I'm not saying that's the plan that has to be, but that would give us kind of a way out and move the ball forward and show some progress.
Judge, when you say that, I assume you're taking the monies out for operations first, right? When you say 100%.
Oh, yes,
Okay.
absolutely, operation, yeah.
And that's one of the other reasons, of course, we could look at this a couple different ways. We asked Jim to put together, a personnel projection, because we need to know how much the operation, obviously, we know what it is right now. But, when you're, especially if you're talking about multi-year grants, you're gonna have to have more personnel to do that. That's a big ask, a big lift. So he's putting numbers to personnel. We probably, our lease is up at Cohatch at, when is it? September. We were talking and we want to talk openly with the board. Perhaps we get something a little closer to Capitol Square. Lease costs are a lot lower than what they have been in the past. We need to build that in. We can do all this by April and come back and say, okay, whatever we vote on, we need to take this amount off the top and then go from there. And then you can go back to your regions and communicate that. I think today might be a slightly premature for that. And we still have 2 or 3 policies we have to finalize, before we're going to be able to get the funds anyway. So I think it'd be prudent to wait until April to vote on this. It gives you 1 more month to think about it and discuss it. And it sounds like there's, at least the consensus seems to be leaning one way more than the other. And we'll have 1 more opportunity next month. We can take a deeper dive into the grant making committee and look at that, investment policy and such. So,
Senator.
For those on the Zoom, this is Rob Kelly. So I was just doing some quick calculations, and we're supposed to be receiving 18 payments. Now, of course, several of them are lumped in early on in this 1 year. But what would it, I was curious what the number would look like if we were to put money, just basically say, we're going to put a fixed amount in the endowment every year and see if that grows conservatively at 5% per year. I think our pensions do better than that, but 5% per year. If we were to say that, and let's say we said, all right, we're going to take a piece of each of those first 3 years payments. And I'm just throwing this out for example, so everybody knows what I'm looking at. If we said we're going to take $5 million from each year's payments, and we're going to throw that into an endowment, so we would take $15 million of this first $88 million, throw that into the endowment, and then say $5 million every year after that, growing at 5% per year. You're looking at the end of the 18 years, or I guess the end of the 15 years at this point, about $140 million that would be in that endowment. It grew at 5%. Probably going to grow larger than that. At that point, you at least give whoever is in our seats down the road the ability to say, what do we want to do continuing going forward? Because there is going to continue to be substance use disorders for all of our lifetimes and then our children and grandchildren's lifetimes. Does that do a lot? Maybe, maybe not, but I just wanted everybody to know what that number looks like. And I don't think it's a good idea at this point to project out necessarily 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, exactly what the percentage breakdown may be, because we don't know what our needs are going to be between region, between state. We may find a great program down in Cincinnati that we say, well, this is the most successful program we've seen in the state. We need the dollars to make this go statewide. And we all know, because many of us sit on appropriating authorities, that if we go and we stay too far out what people are getting, they're expecting that, and we can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And so I would say we need to, I guess, exercise a little bit of caution of how far out we promise some of this stuff in the event that needs come up that are different than what we anticipate right now.
So with every deposit that we get, with every allocation that is of settlement dollars that we get, with that resolution comes with the percentages. So that has to be determined at every time we receive settlement. So to the senator's point, it may not be. We have that ability to change those percentages as we go along, as those settlement dollars come in with that resolution.
So given that, does it really make sense for us to make any decision about percentages past year one?
No.
Well, you may want to do two because it's right there anyway, but.
When I think sorry, Senator McCullough. I think there should also be a conversation about, because there's such a large sum, no matter how we split it up, there's going to be a larger sum in year one than there is the following years. How do we manage expectations, and how do we hand out grant funding at the region level, state level, whatever the case may be, to ensure that we're not overcommitting to the point where we can't even bring on new projects in 3 or 4 years because we've signed on to something that hasn't really demonstrated an ability to kind of carry the load a little bit later on down the line from a funding perspective. And then we don't have money for 4 or 5 years down that's not already encumbered.
William, and I would suggest that we will probably see some capital requests at the beginning that we will not see once the program is established. So when you're looking at the large amount of funding, that can help fund capital requests. And those are going to be larger than operating requests in some respects. You need a new facility to help accommodate the service you can provide. That's a, other than the operation, that's a one-time cost.
So, to build on that, I'm just in the street house. So with our foundation, we have contemplated different amounts of money as we go. I mean, we know this. We know the monies are in flux. We know that we're gonna have more in the first year, so we're planning accordingly. So I think it's on all the regions to say, we got a bunch of smart people sitting around the table. If we know that we're gonna get more of the first tranche than the second tranche, then we plan for that. So we're already doing that work. So I don't know that that's so much an obstacle as maybe, if the regions weren't aware. I mean, the regions obviously have to be aware of that, but we've already been told that some of the money being lumped together.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm not suggesting that the regions aren't already doing that. What I'm saying is, due to the burdens and the duties that we have here, I'm just bringing it up for conversation's sake. Make sure that everybody's on the same page, so we don't say, why the heck didn't we talk about that 4 years ago? And somebody finds himself in a bad spot.
This is Jeanette We're speaking again with Region 11, and I guess maybe I'm viewing this whole grant process differently. To my way of thinking, before we open up a request for grant applications to the foundation, we tell each region what their specific dollar amount is for that year. And to my way of thinking, if an applicant is submitting a request for a multi-year project, those funds for that multi-year project need to be encumbered by the current allocation. So it's not something, I don't believe that you can say, we're gonna do $1 million out of allocation number 1 and $1 million out of allocation 2, just for the reason that the senator said. So to my way of thinking, if we're funding a multi-year project, those funds need to be encumbered when that application is approved.
All right, we've talked for almost an hour, a little over an hour. Any final questions, comments, concerns? Yes.
I just want to, Glenn Miller, Region 16. I just want to make sure that our funding is, we shall, the shalls get funded, the mays set back. Let's make sure, and I know a concern of my region, they're still very skeptical about this, that money's ever going to get to the regional level. And I think it's extremely important that we do fund initially the regional level. You know, we can, and Rob, I appreciate your comments. I do agree, but I think the most important thing is some of the comments have been made. We need to hit this and hit it hard. And then let's see how things. We want to make it. We want to make it. We want to get some of these programs that our counties come up with. We want to get them funded so that they're dealing with the people that need the help. So right now, I'm a proponent of whatever we need for operations, and we can adjust this yearly, but that the balance of the money goes to the regions. That's my opinion.
Let me say the last thing, and is an appreciation for Senator McCollum. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to any of the other folks who've been appointed by the State House, but the senator's been in all of our meetings and fully participating and debating, and for him to take the time, you know, in addition to his day job, really appreciate that you're here and you're engaged in your department. So just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
I come here because this is the only place I can find my county commissioner anymore.
Are there any questions from those on the video? Okay.
Can I just bring a brief comment before we move on?
Please, go ahead.
So this is Christopher Smitherman. And first of all, I want to thank all of the board members who have spoken this morning, this afternoon, about what I think is a very important vote that we'll take in April about the direction around what percentages are going to go to the regions, the state operation, and investments. I just want to take a brief moment, and I've spoken about this before, to express, I think, what is consistent with what the senator said, which is, I think we need to be thinking short-term and long-term in this fight as it relates to this crisis. So I think it's very important that we talk about, I'm in the camp of perpetuity, meaning we should be investing these dollars as the money is coming in, and making sure that we're good stewards of it, not only short-term, but also long-term. And that's the focus on putting some money back every time these tranches of money comes in, no matter when they come in. And I think that we should have a discussion about what percentage of that total money we'd like to put back and invest in this fight, because 18 years from now, as many of you have said, this fight is going to morph and it's going to change and it's going to be different. And it's not going to be personality driven. I don't plan to be here 18 years from now serving on this board. There'll be other people here. And I think it's important that we leave some of these resources for those future board members to fight. And so that's my weigh in. I think we will sort out the state and regional portions, and I believe the state should receive a portion as well as the region. But I would just want to be clear that when we take that vote in April, that all of us really think about not just the short-term pieces, but the long-term fight. Our communities will still be fighting 18 years from now, and I think it's important that we keep some money back. Thank you all so much for allowing me to bring some brief comments.
Thank you, Christopher.
Larry,
Yes.
Senator McCulley again.
Yes.
And I just also like to point out, though, that $140 million number I just threw out there, that's not assuming we raise any money either into the endowment. And so in a perfect world, we might be able to get that number up high enough that the 30, 34 million, 40 million, whatever amount of money that we're getting each year turns out to be an amount of money that is recurring for every year after that. If we're able to raise enough money privately into that endowment or that investment account. And I think that's where, you know, my personal opinion, and I understand where everybody's going, but in my personal opinion, that's really where maybe some of our kids will be on this board and they'll be thanking us for it. So.
Can I just Linda, just another layer? And I respect the conversation about the investment piece. I think from the regional level, the investment that we will make as we get these dollars is in the people to save lives. I mean, honestly, we're talking about saving people's lives. And the more we invest locally and the quicker we do it, the more lives we will save. That's, and I'm speaking from personal experience in Hamilton County. So I understand investment. I understand the idea of money growth. I understand these things. However, I was not put on this board to think about what we're going to spend on in 14 years. I was put on this board to represent what's happening on the ground right now. And the more we invest on the ground right now, the more lives we will save right now. And that is, I will continue to voice that perspective because from where I sit, you know, our numbers are down in Hamilton County right now. It's because of the strategies that we've employed. We're down about 100 deaths, which is huge in Hamilton County. Final numbers aren't out, but that's what we expect. We need to double down on what we're doing. I respect the idea about investment, but I don't want to lose sight of the idea that the more we do now, the more people will be impacted. So there is this balance, and that's the whole conversation, right? We need to strike the balance. I do hope we take a vote. I respect this idea that we really do need to know locally what we're talking about by way of dollar amounts. So the sooner we get this resolved, the better. So I am hopeful that we've talked about this for a number of months now. I hope that next month we'll have some kind of resolution in some, and maybe, you know, I don't know how that process works either. Like, should we all offer ideas? Are we still, I don't know, but I do hope that in April, we're able to move forward collectively and know what we're doing and move it forward.
We'll put it to in April. Yeah, I'd just like to make one point. I took some of the numbers that the senator had thrown out. He threw out 5 million. If I did an investment, don't forget this. Nobody is saying that you should put 100% in statewide or 100% in investments. But if you took 3 million, and I'm not saying you take 3 or 5 or 10 or 1, but if you take 3 million. If you were to allocate that 3 million to the region, the lowest region would only get $38,000. So, but if you were able to invest it or look at other projects that are more statewide impactful, that grows. So is 38,000 going to make that much difference in a small region? It'll make a difference, but is it going to make, you know, as the senator mentioned, over 5 years or 10 years, that same 38 million could be worth 55 or 60. Now, the largest region would that would cost about 400,000, but it's a large region, so I don't know what kind of impact. It might even be yours, because you might be the largest region. So it's 420,000. Now, is 420,000 going to be so impactful that it's going to make that much difference if we were to hold 3 million back as an aggregate and invest it for larger projects later? It's just something to think about. I'm not asking for an answer, it's rhetorical, but nobody is saying that we should put 100% investments or 100% in the state. We all agree that we need to put it in the regions. You know, that's what we were told, that's what we want to do, that's what we need to save lives. But we also, as part of our MOU, is to eradicate the drug addiction. And we're not going to do that through recovery. We're going to do that through prevention and through other methods like, well, like what Dr. Rosen says. So I think you're right, there's a balance. Maybe that balance isn't in year 1 or 2, but over time, I think we need to look, you know, we're all serving, we represent regions or governors or attorney general or legislators, but we're serving on a state board. And we're looking out for not only our regions, but the entire state of Ohio. And I think it's important to remember that. And while we all have, we want to make impact for what we are doing and the people we represent, you know, we're here for the greater good as well. So I think there is a balance between regions and statewide and investment and operations. And we'll come up with it in April. We'll put it to a vote and you guys will have one more month to think about it. We don't have the money yet, so there's not a whole lot of reason to vote today anyway. And we still have 2 or 3 policies we have to finalize before we receive the funds. So
You did a good job. Evan Claymire, statewide appointee, you did a great job, Larry, of summing up what I was gonna touch on, which is I appreciate the fierce advocacy from the district directors, regional directors for their region. Through this discussion, it's interesting to see the statewide appointees talk about, hey, maybe we are looking for more investment funds, more statewide funds, regional appointees looking directly for the region, which is what we're supposed to do. That's why the board is made up like this. So I would suggest as we write this resolution for the first distribution, we take the thoughts and opinions of everyone represented here on the board and make sure that we are looking at those 4 buckets.
all right, with that, we'll move on. So Jim, do you want to give your financial?
Sure, absolutely. Morning, in your board packet or on your iPads, there are 2 reports, for brief discussion this morning. I'd like you to move to the second one, which is the final, fiscal year 22, financial statement. In January, we presented the amount of money that we paid in 22, and the cash balance at the end of that year. I've added the 22 expenses that we paid this year. So we've received all those, reconciled those up and paid those bills, and that gives us in the part column, you know, final 22 expenses. These will be the records that the auditor audits and reports on to you probably sometime this summer or early fall. And are there any questions? Also want to remind everyone that all of this operation has been funded on the $1 million from the McKinsey Fund. So there's been no MOU money spent. This was something the AG gave the foundation to start up. Any questions? Yes.
It'd be helpful as we go forward if we could compare, an expected budget, what our operating monthly is, as we're pulling that up.
We're absolutely gonna have to do that to know how much we allocate out. So we'll try to take that off the top. So we should have at least a rough draft by April.
Judge, I sent to Larry a few days ago a draft outline of a personnel structure based on the conversations over the last several months from this board, for him to review and then start bringing it back to the board, as well as allowing Jim at that point to start building out what that personnel cost is.
So, good segue. So the second report in the packet is the operating budget that was approved in December, and the current status of that. To this report, what I added that's new from February is the column called encumbered, right? Typically, you'll see on your local budgets, a encumbered column, which is those contracts that we've entered into and the board has approved to give you a really true budget balance. One thing I wanted to highlight here is we have hired a CPA firm, SEO CPA out of Zanesville. The Audit and Finance Committee reviewed the applications, the RFPs. It was a very, very competitive process. You can see we're well under the budget. And we kind of drove some of those costs down by, asking them to provide their proposals in relationship to the competition. So the executive committee approved that. And so I've added that to the encumbered column. We may have a few more expenses coming out of there as we set up an accounting system and get some more advice on that, but we should be well under budget there. At the bottom of that sheet is a cash balance, including the balance at the beginning of the year, money we spent. We opened a key account back in February, just to kind of set things up for future funds. Any comments, questions?
Great, hearing none, we'll move on to Catherine.
Hey, in your, separate from your packet, the directors received my interim executive director report. I need to see the regions that are listed at the beginning of that report, whether you give me a phone call or see me, today. I am still trying to get the information for the regional boards. So if your region is listed there, we are missing some information. I'm meeting with the strategic planning committee directly after this, just to put some dates together on a calendar so that we can start our meetings and start that process. There are more pocket MOUs here today. Thank you, Connie, for getting those ordered. We appreciate that. So if your region hasn't received all of them, please take what you need. I continue to meet every week with Connie and Kevin on communication strategies and other things that are happening and with the website and things like that. We have developed an expert panel rubric and it has been presented to the executive committee for review. That will be coming, it will be shared with the board of directors once they approve that. We have received over 88 applications for the expert panel. There is a lot of information, and right now we are just trying to put it all together so that we can start that review process and get those applications and information out to the board of directors in the best way we can. It was definitely an overwhelming amount of information that has come through. Connie and I continue to hold stakeholder meetings. We have had over 19 meetings so far since I started in January. So those are continuing to move along. I have no region meetings scheduled at this time. So if your region is having a meeting and would like me to participate, I'm more than happy to schedule that in. We still have several policies that are outstanding. Those are listed below. I will be reaching out to certain committees. They are responsible to write those policies. So I'll be sending those out over the next couple weeks to get those written.
Great, any questions for Catherine? Great. And we'll jump right into the committee reports. There may not be much to report on a couple of them, but Jeanette, you want to take it off with finance?
Sure, don't have a whole lot to report. Jim has put together a draft fiscal policy that's currently under review. And I think Jim is our intent to have that to the board for the next meeting.
We can, yeah, I think. I think
So-
that,
so
I
we
think
might
the
have
committee
a-
probably
a
needs,
one answer.
yeah, the committee needs to meet. The committee needs to meet and, hash that out.
So has the committee been meeting? Or have there?
We have not had anything.
Okay,
you know, I think
so-
now that we have the draft fiscal policy. this type of-
Anything else? Yes, thank you. Julie, personnel?
Sure. The committee's had 2 meetings and they've been very productive. We started with a draft personnel policy manual obtained from CCAO and chose that due to organizational structure because in most private entity, there's a lot of public engagement and that would give us a good feel for what this board needs to be looking at. We've reviewed and adjusted about 2/3 of the manual, but we're at the point where we need guidance from the executive committee on what kind of staff we're gonna have and what benefits and all of that kind of thing is gonna be included. So we're kind of at a standstill and I'm sure we can get some guidance.
We do appreciate both of your works. Strategy, I assume the strategy is not met yet.
We have not met yet. We are meeting very quickly after to get dates on the calendar for those meetings to transpire and kind of get an agenda set for that.
Okay. And then Tom, second.
Well, I want to thank the hardest working grant committee, in Ohio, we've been meeting on a regular pace and working on our draft policy. Claudia Harold from Philanthropy Ohio is supporting us. Our next meeting is Friday morning at 10, and we'll use that and follow up what we need to do next. We've reached as a committee pretty general agreement on a policy, and when the leadership's ready, we'll, and subject to maybe some things we've heard today, we'll, when leadership's ready, we'll share that policy for conversations. Having approved the policy, we'll then need to work on procedures and processes, and that's gonna be a Friday morning discussion to get started. Just generally, things we've worked through is appeals processes, how does one appeal a grant decision? And our recommendation to you is gonna be that regional decisions are managed at the regional level. Our board will not involve ourselves with that. If there's a statewide funding, then those decisions can be appealed to us. I think there'd be value. There's a 9-page appendix A to the MOU that called abatement strategy. And I'm going to share that with our committee, but it might be valuable for all of you to take a look at it. We've talked at length about what's approved and what isn't. The level of the region, the role of the grant committee and the expert panel is simply to verify that the regional plan is consistent with those strategies. Statewide funding, though, will be made at our board level. We've worked through conflict of interest discussions about both board members and expert panelists, and our recommendation to you will be that regional members recuse themselves from voting in discussion on their particular proposals. Expert panelists do the same. However, not at the expense of an expert panelist who chooses to volunteer for us should not do so with the having excluded their organization or region from submitting funding. We talked about post-grant compliance. This is going to fall more under procedural, but there both needs to be both fiscal and performance reporting. Fiscal reporting, we imagine we take direction from the finance committee on that. We see this ours to work on. We want to come up with a process and procedure that's not burdensome administratively, but that satisfies us with fiduciaries that people are doing what they said they would do on the performance side. The last conversation, this isn't the decision of our group at all, but one of the things we talked briefly about recently is we need to have a conversation, probably led by our fiscal folks, about our willingness to fund some administrative overhead. If you're running an organization, nobody funds that. And what are we going to allow people to charge off to this to help support operations? And those of you who are running agencies understand and are sympathetic to that. And most grant processes set a value at that. They say X% can be for admin. I don't have an opinion about it personally, other than we should support organizations in some capacity, but that's a decision we should make before we let money out. So that's where we are. We're meeting again Friday, and again, it's really been a hardworking group and a very thoughtful group. I appreciate the conversation.
Well, I appreciate all the committees, your committee is the heaviest lift, and you guys have put a lot of work into it. And it's frankly, it's probably the most important one because that really sets the stage for the next 18 years. And it is the one that, one of the things we have to complete before we receive our funds. So, while we can improve how we allocate funds in April, we won't receive them until we get that completed. And right behind that, we'll need, and we're holding off on purchasing industry software and accounting software because we want to see what the grant making looks like first. We don't want to buy the wrong software system. So Jim's currently shopping it, but we don't really have all the questions yet because we don't know what it's going to look like. Any questions for Tom? Okay. As you may or may not be aware, we're no longer using Banish for our legal counsel with one or two exceptions. One exception. Andy is our new counsel. If any of you are approached or have any questions, bring them to the executive committee. Don't call Andy directly because we'll end up, setting him before the withholding speed. So he's very reasonable. But just, if you have a legal question or you have one of your regions have questions, direct them to Catherine and we can, funnel that out. But like I said, if Banish contacts you, then just refer them back to us. The one exception is the litigation, and we're still at a hurry up and wait situation with that. The judge has not ruled yet. So yes.
That's one thing out. It's really, Catherine, you're thinking about personnel staff and personnel committee is too. Probably fairly soon there should be a conversation that will involve for the Herald and our grant committee with you about how we think we best staff these grants.
Okay, I can be on the Friday.
Yeah, I don't know if we're ready to, and we're gonna have a lot of, review and monitoring and all of that. Let's figure out how to do it before we realize we don't know how to do it.
Before we close, I just would like to say thank you to everybody who participated in the discussion conversation today. I mean, clearly this is a passionate, it's an important issue, and we all have our opinions, and I'm really thankful that everybody's willing to express them, and we can have a robust and good conversation. We all want to do the same thing, and that's to help people that are in addiction and move beyond that. And how we get there is, what we were talking about. So, again, thank you for your insight and your hard work. We really appreciate everything you've done, and we continue to look forward to working with you in future months. So, with that,
I can't let you go yet because in your Google Docs on the iPads and hopefully to the online, an investment policy was sent to you. Typically, I know the board likes to have their 30 days to approve that. The executive committee just finalized it this morning. So if you can take a look at that, and then are you looking for a vote today, Don?
We are ready to answer any questions that could lead to a vote.
Okay.
since you just received it, if you'd like to take a month and review it, and if you have questions, you can call Don, if it's okay, they can call you directly, or you can call Catherine or I. It'll give you 30 days, read it, think about it, research it, and then we can come back for conversation and a vote next month. Yeah.
It was emailed to us.
It's on your iPad.
No, we can't take these home with us, so.
It will be sent out, but that was so that you could take a look at it.
So there's no update with the two lawsuits with none of them?
There's no update, not yet. Same as, we're not holding.
Status quo.
The judge has not ruled.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
All right, With that, we'll take a motion to close.
I move to adjourn.
Yes, Second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Security, thanks, everybody.
Christopher? I'm gonna give you a call in just a minute, okay? So that
Okay,
we can set some time.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, you're welcome.